Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new podcast series from us, the EV Geek Studios, called Everyday Electric, where we break down everything you need to know about electric vehicles without all the complicated tech talk for the most part. We are your hosts, Joel and Sebastian, and each episode of this series will cover one key topic. Think of it as a crash course in EV basics, simple, clear, and designed to help you feel confident about electric vehicle purchasing, driving, and ownership. Today's episode is all about charging. We are going to talk about the most common kinds, clarify units, and more. So, without further ado, let's plug in and get started. All right, Sebastian, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. All right, you ready to talk about charging? That's where we're going to start off.
Let's do it.
All right, so there are basic three types of charging. So first one we call level 1 charging, which is basic. So tell everyone about level 1 charging.
Yeah, so level 1 charging is arguably the most ubiquitous form of charging because that's anytime you're charging a vehicle off of a plain Jane regular household outlet. So this is 120 volt charging, plugs into just a standard NEMA 515 wall outlet, same thing your phone charger uses, laptops, whatever. A lot of times this is the cable that comes with your EV if your EV comes with a charger. It's not very fast. You can expect to add maybe 3 to 5 miles of range per hour. So, I mean, this is mainly geared for people that maybe drive 30 miles a day, right? You know, that way you can plug in if your car is going to be sitting, say, 10 hours overnight, you can add 30 miles of range back overnight. No big deal. However, I mean, you can do more than that if you need to. You just know it's going to take a while. I mean, a normal EV would probably take around 40 to 50 hours to charge from dead to full on 120 volts. So this really isn't designed for deep charging. It's designed for I don't drive very much charging or just I have the opportunity to do it. The pros is it's easy to set up because there's normal 120 volt outlets literally everywhere. You know, I'm sure most people who have a garage or a house or a carport or something have some way of doing it. The cons, as we mentioned, it's not fast. It's very slow. And it can be even slower if you're using like shared circuits or things like that. And also, just as a note, you should almost never use an extension cord. And if you are using an extension cord, you should make sure it is the highest quality extension cord you could possibly get. You know, make sure it's rated for however many amps you're pulling through it, etc. And make sure your outlets are in good condition as well. You know, if they feel loose or whatever, that's probably not the best to use for an EV charger, because this is something that's going to be pulling basically the full load of the outlet continuously for however long you have it plugged in.
That's important. Safety first, because we see a lot of people in the forums say, "Can I use an extension cord? Do I need to use a surge protector?" And most of these chargers have surge protectors built in. Correct? These level 1 chargers.
You don't need a surge protector. The charger itself and your car are the surge protector. In fact, sometimes if you add, say, you'll see people run into issues if you're using, like, say, a GFCI outlet and trying to use your car charger at the same time. Since the car's charger, or EVSE, because technically the charger's in the car. Anyway, the EVSE and the outlet they both contain a GFCI, because the EVSE is essentially a GFCI, then they can actually interact with each other and cause one to trip. Just because of the nature of the beast.
And let everyone know what EVSE stands for.
Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, that's level 1. Let's move to level 2, which if you're an EV owner, most people have level 2. We like to call this the sweet spot. So tell everyone about level 2 charging.
Yeah, so level 2 charging is essentially double on paper level 1 charging. So you're now using 240 volt electricity. Think of like what you would use to hook up a dryer or an oven, you know, something like that. And it can be anywhere from 4 to 15 times faster than level 1. You know, you can charge most EVs overnight in about 8 hours or so. A lot of cars, you know, there's a lot of EVs that come out here that literally use like a dryer plug or a stove plug, and that can charge most cars at say 8 kilowatts off of that plug. There's even level 2 chargers that go even higher than that that use like hardwire connections, all that. But anyway, level 2 is kind of the most ubiquitous one. Like I think Ford, they're doing their Power Promise program where they'll install a level 2 charger for you. A lot of these cars come with a level 2 EVSE of some form. That's kind of the what is ubiquitous and what you will find most people end up installing at their homes. And the bad news is it typically does require a dedicated circuit, and you probably should have a licensed electrician install it for it, which will then therefore means it's going to cost you something. Do you have to do any breaker panel upgrades? Do you just how far away is your panel from where your car is parked, etc.? There are situations where if you live in a house with a very low service rating, you might have to have that service rating upgraded in order to install said EVSE or look into alternative products such as I have at my house. I have an Emporio unit that actively monitors how much power my house is using, and if it gets above a certain threshold, it'll cut my EV charger down to a lower rate. But nonetheless, level 2 charging is best for homeowners or workplaces, destinations, basically anywhere your car is going to typically sit for 4 hours or more. And I mean, really, these are just kind of critical units, right? They meet most people's everyday needs. They reduce range anxiety, and they enable like destination charging. You can go to a hotel and plug in overnight. You can go to your work and plug in while you're there. You can, that's kind of where these really fall in, or like a shopping center with a long dwell time. If you're like outside of a mall where you might spend 2 to 3 hours, or an IKEA where you might spend an entire day.
So yeah, and this is and it's very important. You said this helps with range anxiety because, like you and me, we plug our cars in every night. But for the most part, I do. You may not have to because you have one at work. But no matter if I'm at 60% or 40%, I'm plugging in every night with that level 2 charger, and I wake up every morning with 80%. I don't have to worry about it. I have to worry
Yeah.
about if it's a level 1, did I get enough charge? Did I drive too far today to get enough charge? So with EV adoption, level 2 is key. All right. Now let's go into the one that most people don't use that often, but it's the one talked about the most. And that's level 3, and that's DC fast charging. So tell everyone about that.
Yeah, so DC fast charging is big boy charging. So this bypasses the car's built-in AC charger. So this whole time, I keep saying charger because that's kind of the ubiquitous term. But level 1 and level 2, the charger is technically not the cable. It's not the piece you're plugging into the wall. As I mentioned before, that is actually the EVSE, the electric vehicle supply equipment. The physical charger is in your car, and that is what turns your AC power from your wall into DC power for the battery. Level 3 charging bypasses that step. So the thing you're plugging into is actually the charger, and it offloads DC power straight from the unit to your battery. And because of this, it can do it at much higher rates. So DC fast charging can charge most EVs 10 to 80%, somewhere between 20 to 45 minutes. And we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. This is typically what you're going to use on a road trip or on a quick like highway stop and things like that. The bad news is this does require big boy power. So you have to have commercial grade electricity, 480 volt, 3-phase electricity like you would find at a Walmart or a restaurant or whatever else. It requires large transformers and all that jazz, and they're expensive to install and they're expensive to maintain. And some of that then gets passed on to the consumer. The charging rates tend to be 40 to 70 cents per kilowatt hour, it seems now, which, compared to what we pay here in Arkansas at home of like 11 cents a kilowatt hour, is a pretty significant difference. And frequent fast charging, it can honestly be equivalent in cost or more than it would cost you to drive the equivalent distance in a gas car. And then you have some other challenges with DC fast charging. It's still limited in some areas. It's getting way better every day, but there are still rural areas where there's just not a lot of it. And again, it's just expensive to install. That said, as you get more and more of these almost electric gas stations out there, you should see better EV adoption because people will be more and more confident to actually take them on trips and do whatever else. And again, that just reduces range anxiety.
So you did mention something about 40 to 70 cents per kilowatt hour, and then how many kilowatts, it's confusing, the units. Let's talk about the units. I get confused them all the time. You always make fun of me in our videos. That's kilowatt hour. And you actually did in our last video, you mixed it up a little bit. So let's talk about this thing. Let's talk about these units. So it can be confusing for a new EV driver or someone who's EV curious to read about 150 kilowatt charging and 75 kilowatt hour battery packs. So you're talking kilowatts versus kilowatt hour. The units are so similar as it leads to conversations where the wrong one gets used. I do it all the time. Not on purpose, but I just do it. So what's the difference? So to put it short and sweet, one measures power and one measures energy. Understand that? Okay, that might not be helpful. All right, think of it like this. Use this analogy to describe this. A kilowatt, think of a water hose. Everyone knows what a water hose is. A kilowatt is how much pressure is coming out of that water hose. You got a good pressure at your house, you got more kilowatts coming out. If you have bad pressure like I do in my backyard, you have very little kilowatts coming out. A kilowatt hour is how much water is going to be in that pool once you fill it up. A kilowatt is how hard you're running. A kilowatt hour is how far you've run. So, Sebastian, you kind of want to expand on that a little bit too?
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of nailed it there. So I
Yep.
mean, if you're filling up a pool, however much water is in it is how many kilowatt hours of energy, right, is in your
Mm-hmm.
battery, how much water is in the pool. And then the kilowatt is how much, how much force the water is coming out. It's how hard you're running, etc. Basically any unit that is power. So what pressure, speed, you know, I'm moving 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's your
Or
kilowatt. And then
or
I've
miles per
traveled 60
kilowatt hour. So yeah.
miles
Yep.
is, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, those are both good analogies. And so,
Gotcha.
in a perfect universe, if you plugged into a 7 kilowatt charger for 1 hour, you would think you would have 7 kilowatt hours of energy in your battery. But we don't live in a perfect universe.
We do not.
So let's talk about a few of the aspects that can cause that to not be true. So first off, charge curves. So this primarily applies to DC fast charging. Each vehicle manufacturer has their own idea on how to charge up a battery. So, and this is because think of it like you're filling up a balloon. Okay? I came up with this, I promise. As you start to kind of blow into that balloon, it's pretty easy, right? But as the balloon gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it gets harder to inflate. That's exactly the same way that's exactly how charging a battery works, right? When you first start charging the battery, it's really easy to put electricity in there. And as your battery gets at a higher and higher and higher state of charge, it gets harder and harder and harder to add that electricity. And as it gets harder, the speed has to slow down because it, requires more force to add energy in. And as it gets harder, you start creating heat. Heat also affects your charge rates and your charge curve because the car wants to then limit how much power is coming in to protect the battery. Um, and just, yeah. And on the subject of heat, let's talk about just temperature in general. So if your battery's too hot, the car will slow down your charge speed to protect the battery. And on the same token, if it's too cold, your battery won't be able to, bring power in near as fast, and therefore you'll charge slower until the car naturally warms up enough through charging to then take full power. And this is why you'll hear a lot of times people start talking about things like battery preconditioning, on route battery preconditioning, or being able to do it manually. And the whole point of preconditioning is to make sure your battery is in that optimal temperature range to be able to charge best it can. Again, this only really applies to DC fast charging. No one out there has AC power that can output enough juice to really matter. Even the biggest boy charging vehicles on the road have like only a 19 kilowatt AC onboard charger, right? And that would be something like a Hummer EV or a Silverado or something like that. For all intents and purposes, you're never going to be in a situation where your big boy battery can't pull in however much power it says it can. But in DC fast charging, you might. And that's where battery preconditioning, things like that come into. And then continuing on, efficiency is also a component. Say you're charging at 7 kilowatts. Not all of that battery power makes it to the battery. Your car might use a little bit of that power to cool the battery, for example. Your car might use a little of that power to just, in the conversion from AC from your wall to DC for the battery pack. Some of it gets lost to heat. Some of it gets lost to, there's all sorts of random things that can happen to just cause some of that power to go away, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you
And
mentioned that, because if you're looking at a DC fast charger, let's say DC fast charger, what you see coming out of the DC fast charger may not be the same that's going in. It may say you have 125 coming out, but you look in your car, you're like, why is it only 112? You're losing
right,
some of that power, correct?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately too, this last one is honestly the most complicated one to try to explain. Sometimes the charger or the car will just have limits. Car limits are the easiest ones to explain. I see this all the time in Facebook groups. If your car advertises that it can charge at speeds of up to, let's say, 200 kilowatts, you won't ever see more than that, or at least you shouldn't expect to. Taking your 200 kilowatt charging car and plugging it into a 500 kilowatt charger won't magically make the car accept more power. Okay? This is taking your 50 kilowatt Chevy Bolt and plugging it into the 350 kilowatt EA station won't make it charge any faster. I say that out of love. I'm a Bolt owner. I saw this the other day on a Facebook group. I think it was a Sierra group or Hummer group. Someone saying, well, soon Tesla's going to have 500 kilowatt stations that will allow us to charge even faster than the 350 kilowatt EA stations.
Nope.
Nope, not how that
Nope.
works. Unfortunately, the next one is the part that's really kind of hard to explain. And I do, unfortunately, have to get technical on this. I'm so sorry. So, charger limits. Many chargers in the wild will be labeled things like, let's say, 150 kilowatt. But that's not always true. Or it's not always true in all situations. Okay, so for example, this is where math comes in. I'm sorry. A 150 kilowatt Electrify America station, for example, is limited to 350 amp output. So you can get your kilowatt number by taking your amps and multiplying it by voltage. So if you drive a, let's say, 400 volt car, 400 volts times 350 amps is only 140 kilowatt, not 150. If you drive something with even lower voltage, let's say an Equinox EV, for example, which sits around 300 volts, you'll only get 100 kilowatts until the pack voltage climbs. So on that same token, a 350 kilowatt EA station can output 500 amps of power. So 500 amps of power would allow most cars, if they could support 350 kilowatt charging, to do it. But at the same time, then it means 500 amps of power on your 300 volt Equinox is only 150 kilowatts. So that's more complicated, and honestly, that could be a whole episode in and of itself, talking about the math of EV charging and how that is just complicated. But who knows? We might not ever record that, because that's a lot of numbers to throw out, and it's very situation dependent. Sometimes you'll run into chargers that say, oh, I support 180 kilowatts, and in reality, they only support 180 amp output at 1,000 volts, which no car uses except for, I guess, a Lucid Air. So again, it's kind of market. You have to kind of battle through marketing versus technical limitations, etc. And charger limits can also exist due to faults on the charger. So for example, on an EA station, if there's some issue with the cable cooling on the charger itself, the charger will limit itself to 30 kilowatts. And I didn't even mention during the temperature part, the charger itself can have an impact based on temperature. If the cable gets too hot, the charger is going to limit the speed to try to bring the temperature back in check in order to not damage the unit or your car. And so you never know, if I'm getting a low speed, is it my car or is it my charger? A lot of us big EV nerds or people who've been doing it a long time, that's like our first place our brains will go is like, is the charger broken or is my car mad? Which one is it? And you'll see a lot of people who do this have done this a lot, or really care. They'll unplug the car and plug into a different cable on the same dispenser, and if then it's the same thing happens, oh, okay, that's probably the car's fault, not the charger's fault.
Yeah.
but we don't expect normal people to do that either.
Yeah, you'll see this a lot, in the South, dead of summer. It's 105, 110 degrees and you're trying to charge. And nice thing about some chargers will let you know, like Tesla will let you know if the station is derated or something like that, and you're not getting full power, things like that. Or if there's a lot of people charging, it's an older station, they may derate the power too as well. But that's very important. And I think it's important what you said, you're not going to get more just because you had a faster charger. And I make the analogy of if your car can only do 65, smashing the pedal down as far as you can, you're only going to go 65. That's as fast as you're going to go.
Your car that only, yeah.
Yeah.
If your car has a top speed of 65 miles an hour, driving on a road of a speed limit of 85 doesn't magically make it do 85.
Thinking if I'm going to go 80. No. So if your car, like a Bolt, can only charge at 50 kilowatts, there's no need to pull into that 350 kilowatt station because you're only going to get the most 50 kilowatts. So yeah.
Except it's not always that easy. I
know. There's so much other things that take, there's so much things that are just out of our control that happen.
Because sometimes you drive an Equinox EV that can only charge at 150 kilowatt, but the 150 kilowatt station can't give you enough amps to get you to 150 kilowatts.
Yes, and we see it all the time. This car is supposed to charge at 150 kilowatts, and I only got 90, or I only got 80. And they're like, they want to take the car back because they think there's something wrong with it. It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with your car. You promise. So
yeah. And this is to an area, like for EA specifically, we're going to see improvement on, because now they're only installing 350 kilowatt units. Which helps a bunch. There's not going to be these, moving forward, we should hopefully see less of these weird power limits, station to station type deal.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that is a wrap for our first episode of Everyday Electric. Don't forget to subscribe to EV Geek Studios and tap the notification icon so you know when new content is released. If you are new to our channel, we almost always release videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with Friday being our weekly news episode known as the Friday Charge. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you again on another episode of Everyday Electric. So long, everyone.